guys, welcome to Orks 101. This is the next in the series about the Detachment War Horde. This, to me, is if you were going to pick one detachment that you probably should start with. This is probably the one I think, not just because it was the index detachment that the Orks had, but because it's kind of the most all-round, really. Like, plays up to the strength of a lot of what the data sheets themselves do. Just kind of compounds what strengths a lot of them have already, kind of makes it kind of sing a bit better as an army. So right, let's get to it. So what is the detachment rule? It is called Get Stuck In, which is basically melee weapons equipped by Ork models from your army have the sustained hits 1 abilities. So any unmodified 6s you roll get an additional hit. So this is a lot better than previous versions of like Ork rules where you have like Daka shooting, which kind of exploded, but you had to roll to hit with those second shots. This is just nice and clean, straightforward. It speeds up the game that way around, so it's good. This then encourages you, obviously, that you have a lot. Probably you skew a bit more into your melee, which is what Orks really do. Like more Daka as a detachment's probably more the shooty stuff. Dread Mob as well, but if you're wanting to do kind of the traditional Orks running forward, screaming, shouting war, punching stuff with some guns backing it up, this is the way to go, really, I think. So right, and let's go and look at the enhancements. So this one is Follow Me Lads. This is one that I generally put in every list. So this is Ork models only. While the bearer is leading a unit, add +2 to the move characteristic of models in that unit. So the kind of the common archetype at the moment is you get Ghazghkull leading a mob of 20 boys. You put a big mech in there as well. Give him this enhancement, so he's already giving you reroll advances, and you can move through models and terrain when you move or advance. Adding this on, it means you're then moving 8 or 7 for Gazmakari with a reroll to your advances, and then this, and then there is also a stratagem that you can pair with it nicely as well. So and then if you're not doing the Gaz brick, I've seen it quite often done with a war boss in Mega Armor leading some Mega Knobs just to get them kind of shunted across the board a bit quicker because they're only movement 5, so it definitely helps there. I've not done it myself, but I'm sure it's great still. The next one is Headwhopper's Kill Chopper. This is often when I've got 20 points spare. I use this, so I put it on things like a war boss that will be leading something like Breaker Boys or Claw Knobs. Basically means that he gets devastating wounds on the melee, excluding the extra attacks, so no dev wounds on your attack squig, which is really a shame. So I love this on the war boss, especially when he's with something like Breaker Boys or the Knobs, because on his go turn, so in the Waaagh, he gets the additional attacks, so he ends up with 9 attacks with his Power Claw. That can do a lot of work, and if you give all of those attacks dev wounds, it can spike. You can go a whole game where it doesn't do anything, but then there'll be another game where he just tanks something pretty nasty, which is pretty good. Yeah, so one often I find if you've got spare points. Then we've got Cunning but Brutal. This is Orks models only. Whilst the bearer is leading a unit, that unit is eligible to shoot and declare a charge in which a turn in which it fell back. So I quite often use this if I've got 35 points left. I will give Head Chopper and I'll put this in just to make up the points. Or if I've only got 15 points rather than 20, I'd take this. Quite often I forget I've taken it, but that's not the point. It's useful. So if you've got a situation where you have like a war boss with Breaker Boys and they don't quite kill something and they stay in combat with you and go, right, I'm a vehicle, I'm just going to keep shooting at you. It gives you the freedom then to charge back in. It's helpful. It's not very orky, but why not? The other option, of course, is if you've got something like a big mech with a shock attack gun leading one of the gun units and they've got tagged and then you're like, oh cool, I can't shoot them. This gives you that freedom. So I'm not necessarily worried about that particularly, but it's a choice, right? And then finally we've got Super Cyborg Body, another cheap 15 points one. This gives the bearer a Feel No Pain 4-up. Helpful, again, it's one of those ones where it's nice to have, but often it doesn't make that much of a difference because it only works on obviously that character itself rather than its unit, unlike things like Follow Me Lads, which is a bit more all-encompassing, which I think makes it a much more strong choice to take. So it's one that, yeah. Right, and let's look at some strats. So this is probably my favourite of the strats if it auto-exploded. But what it is basically in any phase, just after an Ork vehicle unit from your army has successfully rolled a deadly demise ability. So that vehicle has rolled a 6 to explode. You can then spend the CP to essentially make a normal move or fallback move before the deadly demise is resolved or any emergency disembarkment has been done. So this is a really cool thing. I've often used it as a very aggressive thing of like, I'm going to move it away from my stuff that's nearby and to damage something that's not too near. But there's the other trick is your guys then get out. So say your truck moves 12 inches, it falls back, you're nowhere near an objective, but you fall back, and then suddenly you're within 12 of an objective. You then throw all your guys out within 3, or wholly within 3, and then they get out there. They're battle shocked now, but then at the start of your command phase, unless they're less than half starting strength, they won't have to take a battle shock test. So it's a good way of flipping a point. So very situational. I really wish it was an auto explode strat, but I think that might be a bit too good. So they've had this as a stratagem for a couple of editions, so I can see something similar being in future editions as well. So then we got Orks is never beaten. This is probably the reason to take the detachment. On top of sustained hits, having this where you pay 2 CP and you guarantee fight on death. So the only time this isn't really useful is if you're playing something that can battle shock you, so before you can play this stratagem against a unit. So if you're doing that that Gazgul and the Big Mech and the 20 Boys brick, those sorts of things that give you great value, or you know they've got an interrupt, you're like, cool, I'll fight here and then I'll have to fight on death there. And it's just, it's useful. There's been times where I've used it and then found that I didn't actually need to because they didn't do enough damage to really, especially in the Waaagh, you're like, cool, I've managed to roll a lot of 5-ups. But it's very useful to have. So a lot of the other Orc detachments, if they have a fight on death, it's on a 4-up, or I think in Bully Boys it's on a 4-up. And it's on a 5. Yeah, it's a 4-up. It's on a 5-up or a 4-up, and then it's +2 if you're in the Waaagh. So it's handy, but this is much more the strength is that it's just reliable. And the biggest problem Orcs often have is reliability with things. So being able to guarantee you've got a fight on death, pretty cool. So, and then we've got Unbridled Carnage. This is one that really, if you've got your go turn and you've connected with the Gaz brick exactly where you want it to go, you go, right, this unit is now getting crits on 5s. The Gaz brick would have that anyway, so if you've got the Gaz brick and the Makari aura of 12 inches around it has that, but then you've got, say, Breaker Boys or some Beast Snagger Boys that have gone off to go pick off, say, a vehicle, something that you don't really want to be surviving, and you've got limited amount of attacks. Spend a CP, getting crit 5s, cool. So you'd be, if you're led by a character, you'll be hitting on 2s in combat, crit 5s. That's a lot of attacks that could potentially go through. So it's very handy in those sorts of situations. Obviously, if you haven't got the Gaz brick and you've just got a big hammer unit anyway, that'd be a way to do it. But I find it's one that I always try to have some CP for it if I can. But between an interrupt or the Orcs is never beaten, keeping that 2 CP for that means I don't always use this one as a result. So, and then we've got Ardor's Nails. This one is really, really impactful. So one of my favourite data sheets is the Knobs. They have the situational -2 wound. So theirs is if your strength beats their toughness, they're -2 wound. So you can never wound them on 2s, essentially. This is an Orc infantry unit that's not Grot, monster or vehicle. So basically infantry and mounted. So your Squig Boys count for this as well. Until the end of the phase, each time an attack targets your unit, they're -2 wound. So it's not just for this activation as well, it's for the entire phase. So again, if you're in a situation where it's your opponent's turn, they've got their one big hammer piece going into your Gaz brick or your big valuable piece, and you go, okay, -2 wound. And suddenly, say they were already hitting on 4s, they're now hitting on 5s, it can be a real pain. Being toughness 5 as Orcs means that quite often it really skews people's maths if they've designed the list about killing T4 power armor guys. So it's pretty spicy, and I really enjoy this. It's giving you cool tools to keep your stuff around, despite only having a 5-up base save and a 5-up Invan in the Waaagh. It gives you something. Right, and then we've got the mob rule. This is one that I find situation is really helpful. It doesn't happen to be that useful too often for me though. So end of your command phase, you can target one mob unit from your army that contains 10 or more models and is not below half strength. They can then select a friendly battle-shocked Orc infantry unit within 6 of that unit. They are no longer battle shocked. So a lot of the mob rule stuff previously had been things like taking mortal wounds from being punched by a knob or a war boss. I like this a lot better because it's just going, you've got a big, successfully kind of not weakened unit leading the charge. The other boys want to flipping get involved, and that is pretty cool. That makes sense. It's helpful. It obviously won't help you in certain situations, but then if you've got a unit that you really need to be able to use strats on, or you want it to flip a point, that's what they're there for. So, and then we've got, here we go. This is what I spend a CP most turns on. It's basically at the start of your movement phase, so you can't start moving your models around and then go, oh, I need to do this. So obviously a good opponent will be just like, oh, don't forget to do that. But basically target one infantry unit from your army. Until the end of the turn, they get +2 to advance and charge rolls. So remember that gas brick that we were talking about earlier. So you're already going 8 inches. You're re-rolling natively your advance rolls, and those advance rolls then become an 8. That means that Gazgul Thrucker plus Big Mech plus 20 boys brick has a threat range of up to 30 inches. So you're moving 8, you're advancing up to 8, and then you're charging up to 14. That is incredibly spicy. Obviously, you can't reliably make 10-inch charges. Sure, you're rolling an 8, but there is some really cool situations where you go, okay, I'm going to charge this guy, wrap you with all this stuff, and then I've got the freedom to kind of spider web out. So you end up kind of slingshotting off a close charge to then wrap that, and then all your spare bodies, maybe even Gazgul, then gets to hit something else. So I've had it quite often where I've charged something, and then next, not even close particularly, like 5-6 inches away, will be a fights first unit. And for whatever reason, I've made it so that they don't really want to heroic in. Maybe they don't have the CP. I've often found the best thing to do is charge one unit, slingshot round them, and then pile into those units, and then you avoid things like the fight first. So some cool tech here that this really can help enable, really kind of helps with the micro kind of tactics of the fight phase, which in itself is still a bit clunky at times, especially when moving big units. So definitely want to kind of keep your CP for. So having in your list things like grots, so you on a 4-up get a CP every turn, really helps because you're going to be eating CP for breakfast. So between this and the 2 CP fight on death, you're going to always want to have kind of 3 or 4 CP in the bank. So there's not the situation where you should be spending your CP on things like rerolls, perhaps. Obviously, with things like having a reroll advances then natively, and maybe putting into your list things like breaker boys that have reroll charges built into their data sheet, it helps. So, right, and let's go with an example. So this isn't the perfect list. This is very much a lot of how I've played it, and a lot of the good stuff in it is what I've seen people use as well. So we've got the main brick, which is kind of the main hammer piece of the list, is Gazgul with Makari. So very nice. Obviously in the Waaagh they give so it gives his unit +1 to hit, +1 to wound. In the Waaagh, crit 5s and lethals as an aura within 12 of Makari. So you've got the Gaz brick essentially hitting and wounding most things on 2s, which is bonkers as a go turn. Granted, it's a lot of AP1 choppers, but then there is Gaz's strike, which is a nice healthy 4 damage, which I, at the last ITT, almost killed a Stomper with them. I didn't quite get enough bodies in, but it was a Stomper and a Gorkanaut got smacked by the unit, and it was pretty cheeky. Then I've got Bosnick Grot. So I quite often put this in a list as a tech piece. It could be replaced by just having Storm Boys. I like having both. I'm a bit of a utility sort of slut. I kind of like having a bit of access to that stuff. So what's really useful about him is he could join the commandos that are in the list as well. I wouldn't bother. Gives you a lone op, so gives you that action monkey, and he's got a special ability where once per game in your movement phase you can pick him up and drop him back down at the end from strat reserves. So that's really helpful. So if you've got something behind enemy lines, a cheap way of getting that consistently. The downside is in this detachment there isn't a reactive move, so you can't do the Combi Lieutenant Space Marine mess that everyone gets to do, but he's a little bit more honest in that respect. He's stealthed, lone op, helpful. Then we've got a war boss with the enhancement of Headwhoppers Kill Chopper, so he's got dev wounds, really nice and handy. I have that leading 10 knobs, which will be in the battle wagon, which is further down, which has got an arcade, so it's a T12, so it's basically an Orc Land Raider, so it's a T12, always got armor contempt, so it's always worsening their AP by 1, 16 wounds, nice and spicy. Put them in that, and then basically, situationally, they can go in and chew up a lot of things. They're not really an anti-vehicle killing unit. They are there more to go into some elite infantry, like the damage 2. It's pretty good at killing Space Marines, consistently killing sort of elite infantry, so it's helpful as a tool. Then we've got 2 trucks, so they can be led. They'll have the tank busters and the flash kits in. That way, they have a safe way of getting moving around the sort of the table. So having a T8 kind of tin can to keep them alive in. There is also in the list a mech. This guy heals stuff, but also he gives 1 vehicle +1 to hit. So this is a really cool trick that you put 2 units of tank busters in a truck. The truck then, using the firing deck, shoots them like they would normally, so only hitting on 5s, but because he gives them the +1, it means your truck is essentially hitting with 5d3 blast tank buster rocket shots plus 4 pistol shots if they're within 12. That could be a lot of shots. Hitting on 4s, it's not awful. Yeah, so that's a cool trick. And then having same with the flash kits. And then what's good about the flash kits is they're sustained hits with their guns. So yeah, they're not the most accurate, but if you spike, they're great at picking up some kind of, maybe some screens or something. And then because they're coming out of a truck, if the truck blows up, you've basically got 10 knobs to throw at people, which is helpful. I then quite often put 2 units of Gretchen in my lists. One of these Gretchen units could be 20 with Zogrot. I've tried that. It's fun. It can be a bit unwieldy. It does give a question to your opponents. The reason I tend to do this is I have one as a screening unit, one that sits on my home objective just to farm CP, because on a 4-up you gain a CP from them, and this detachment loves CP, so doing that really useful. Then we've got 10 commandos. Their data sheet got an update where they can split into 2, so I tend to have 5 little sort of chopper commandos going and screening somewhere, maybe Hulk like going on to my kind of expansion, and then a unit with all the other gubbins and the things like the bomb squig, which nice distraction piece, maybe go and pressure their expansion. It's just useful tech. Then 2 units of Storm Boys. I'll at least put 1 of them in reserve, just to have to drop down for things like behind enemy lines, or to try flip a point that's been stickied or something. And then finally 2 units of Tank Busters. So I really like them in this kind of update they've been given. It's annoying that they can't be reinforced, so you do just get kind of 2 units of 6. They get 2 bomb squigs, so once they've finished a normal move on a 3-up, they do D3 mortal wounds to a visible target within 12, which I find really useful if you get them out of a truck, they step out, they line up to shoot something, they throw a squig bomb at it, and then if they don't quite kill it, you can even throw them in for a charge, and it's helpful. So as you can see, it's got a nice mixed armors feel to this list. You can quite often find people take things like Beast Snagger Boys for a similar role of their kind of the dev wounds on the charge from the Beast Boss with the other guys. It's really handy. They get a lot of attacks through. They've got feel no pain, so they're a bit more chewy. Bit of OC as well, so quite often I'll switch them in instead of flash kits or the tank busters, but depending on the sort of feeling you're going for. I think at the last ITT I switched out for, I took the flash kits out for them. So there's not a right way to play them, but at the moment this is kind of a good kind of a starting point for you guys. So I've really enjoyed playing. So since October, I've basically been playing Orks consistently. I've played mostly War Horde. I didn't really enjoy it at the beginning of the edition because it felt very much like you had very specific ways to play. I've kind of settled with it now, and I enjoy it. I just feel that at times there's a few tricks that the edition's kind of introduced that this doesn't have. So it doesn't have a reactive move. It really struggles at times to kind of play around that sort of stuff, but it's quite honest but it does something well. So especially in a teams format, it can be quite good, kind of going and beating up stuff. So I've had a great adventure going and beating up Chaos Knights when they're a problem by just throwing Beast Snagger Boys, Tank Busters, headlong at stuff, the Gaz Brick. It all just chews through whatever you throw at. So very handy, and just this is probably a good place to get kind of comfortable with some of these units because the boys might update in the new edition if that's coming. Flash Gits feel relatively safe. I don't imagine Storm Boys will disappear. They might get new models. So this is all stuff if you're going to play with it. Maybe the only one is the little mech, lesser used, but a lot of it's all new stuff. So it's that I think things that you can enjoy now, understand how the kind of the army works, and then if this detachment still exists in 11th edition or whatever, cool. You've got a nice starting point. If you've enjoyed this, guys, don't forget, please hit the like button below. It really helps us with the algorithm and just gets this out there to people that obviously are trying to understand things like how these detachments work, and that's really cool. And obviously, if you really enjoy this, hit subscribe. I'm going to be working my way through all the Orc detachments. I did this with the Dark Angels last year, and I really enjoyed that. It really kind of got me to understand them better as well, because I then went and played them all. So the next video I'm going to do next week, because I'm going to do them quite rapidly now, is I'm going to do the freebooter crew. So I just to give you guys a bit of a heads up, I went to an RTT with it, and so I've got some insight already, although that's only a couple of weeks old. So yeah, and if you really enjoy this, you can become a YouTube member as well. We do extra bonus videos, so on a Friday there's at least one new video which is exclusive to YouTube members, but we also churn out as much as we can extra as well. So until next time, guys, take care. Cheers.